Welcome, everybody. Welcome. I want to give a big thank you before we begin to David Philippian, our regular contributor, donates $10, and Daledas, thank you so much. $20. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Daledas. God bless you. Your donations and tips really do help, and so I'm so grateful for that. Let's just go over a few announcements. Today is the first day of the Canvas University College online course, epistemology course. I'm keeping enrollment open for a few more days, so you can come in. And again, this is really one of the best courses you could actually take that I have to offer. So we have payment plans, and you can purchase that there. We've got a good sized class, which means that in the discussion boards and the projects that we do, it's, the more people we get into the class, actually, the better. You get more out of it. And this is by far going to be one of the best ones. So tell your friends, pass that on. I'm keeping enrollment open for a few more days. Also, don't forget to purchase your tickets. We have 38 days. For Orthodox MontaNIKA. And we have a very special blessing with His Grace, whom the conference is under as Forum, Bishop Maxim, who will actually be with us the week before for our parish feast day for Pentecost. And what that means is not only do we have His Grace for Pentecost, but Holy Spirit Monday, in which it looks like my foot, that he may even do a hierarchical liturgy at our parish here in the Helena area, in Helena, Montana. It's actually in Clancy, but it's Helena, our little satellite mission parish. And then even another surprise possibly on Wednesday, right before the conference. A lot of people are coming in Wednesday. We may actually have another hierarchical liturgy somewhere very, very special. And so around here. So if you decide to come to the conference and you come a day early, you're going to be really blessed. We also have the Thursday monastery tour. Hammy Leia donates $10. I adore morning prayers with all of you. Christ is risen. He is risen. Thank you so much, Hammy Leia. Unlisted logos. Yes, I do have more Canvas classes after the epistemology. Technically, I could do other classes at the same time. We haven't done the ethics yet. I have the ethics class course built out, and we haven't done the philosophy of science. Again, I don't do... I'm willing to do those at any time, even now. But I have to have, in order to make it worthwhile, at least 3 people signed up. So if you could find 3 people to sign up for one of those courses with you, I'll kick it off right now. I've already built out the course. I have them. So I don't mind doing that. Wonderful. You have your bishop too. Gotcha, Montana. Yeah, this one's going to be the best ever. Like I said, people say I'm going to wait till next year. I can't promise you. I mean, we're going to we'll try, but things change. I can't promise you we're going to have one next year. We're going to try to plan, but things come up, and so God forbid this is the last year and you didn't avail of. So make sure that you come. We're certainly not going to be blessed to have His Grace Bishop Maxim. So it's more the, he only comes every year and a half, or every 2 years, or every other year, at best. So if you say, well, I'll just do it next year, they may not be in next year. And if there was next year, His grace is not going to be gracing and blessing us with His presence next year. So this is really the one that you want to go to. It's the best one yet. We have Father Turbo. We have all the breakout therapy workshops, and just bigger and better, right? Better production value, everything. So I think you can do it. I know it seems like a lot to kind of put up, but there's not a person that hasn't attended that says, man, I wish I didn't spend the money going up there. And we make it as affordable as possible. You have conferences that are charging $300 to $600 for 3 days. This is really cheap. $185 for all the meals, a discount hotel. $85. It's probably going to be more by the time the discount. By the time the conference rolls around, because just the price of like hotels in the summer everywhere is up. And then we have the free camping option too. So I make it as affordable as possible. You get the most out, because it is difficult to get flights, or drive out. It's a little bit expensive. So I make it as affordable as possible for you. So avail of that deal. Other announcements. Don't forget we have sponsorship packages. If you yourself want to sponsor, or you have a business, or somebody that does, or just individually wants to sponsor, somebody doesn't own a business, we have those sponsorship packages there as well. But 38 days, can you believe it? It is fastly approaching. Tickets will sell out, so don't procrastinate. Other news announcements, I think I've covered it all. Just double check and see if we got. Okay, let's do Q&A discussion. We can also go into finish our article that we're reviewing, Virtuous, Victimhood, Signs of Dark Triad Traits, if you want, or we can pick another topic to kind of go through. Oh, don't forget the other announcement too. We've started our back to our Inquires, Catechesis, and Continuing Education. And yes, that is 3 groups that's targeted, are those who are just inquiring to Orthodoxy, those who are catechumens, and those who are already Orthodox but want to continue their education. We're going through Father Michael Pomazansky's book, Orthodox Dogmatic Theology. We're in chapter 2 right now on the Holy Trinity. We had a great catechesis class Saturday night. Now, that's rare. We don't usually do it on Saturday night. We do them Friday nights, but I had a godson came down Friday night, and so I pushed it out to last Saturday night. But they are every Friday night, 6 p.m., unless something comes up. And so tune into that. Remember also that the Antiochian House of Studies has that listed in their syllabus. My course, my catechesis, continuing education in their seminary program and syllabus. So we want to thank them for their support. And also, the topic of the Holy Trinity was really, really amazing, really deep dive. And so we will see all of you Friday night here, 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, for those that want to join and continue through that course and the text with us. Okay, that is all the announcements. Who is Rocco Basilis? I don't know. I do want to say that as far as time and energy and also drawing attention to people, it's very rare that we should there's few examples of people that should actually be addressed or refuted publicly. So I don't know if this Rocco's Basilis is somebody that should be addressed. Oftentimes it gives them too much attention. It's not worth, unless, somebody's really confused, drawing a lot of people away or something like that. And even then you have to be aware of, is it, worth your time and energy? I think instead of addressing people head on like that, it's often best just to give the arguments for orthodoxy. You don't have to refute. That itself refutes all the other positions. Once you start to learn about orthodox, you just see the rest of the stuff's a bunch of nonsense. So I think the energy is better directed in learning, first and foremost, the kind of fundamentals of the faith, the kind of general arguments for the Holy Trinity and revealed, what has been revealed to us. And so that's usually where I spend most of my time. Noah Strong, $20. Thank you so much. God bless you and thank you for all you do. Thank you so much. Yeah, what exactly is the deal? It's some sort of AI, like... I mean, isn't it kind of just immediately evident that it's bad and wrong, even probably from a secular point of view? We could go over, if you want, the arguments refuting strong AI. As Numa points out, philosophically, we can actually prove that there's no way that AI can ever actually become artificially intelligent or gain consciousness. But that's typically, as Orthodox and other people, that's not really the main concern. The main concern is what it's going to do to human beings and human life and the way that we learn, especially in terms of work and it being weaponized and these sorts of things. Yeah, I've thought about doing a philosophy of mind course. In some sense, it could be a great argument that if people get blackpilled and they're in existential, they're in fear of something that's that powerful that could destroy all human life and life as we know it, isn't that a great reason to become Orthodox? Like, what's the only thing that could defeat something like that? An all-powerful, all-loving God who has already won. None of this stuff as you've seen throughout history, none of these things last. Evil is self-destructive and implodes. And the fact of the matter is, death has been conquered. Nobody is. I don't know why people are freaking out that all of you are going to die. So all the devil can do is, right, since Christ has defeated death and you will live forever, all the devil can get you to do is have fear going into death. But it's really an irrational. Suppose something like that didn't exist. It's not like you're not going to die anyways. So I don't know why people get so freaked out that like something can kill them, or it's like you're going to die anyways. So all of it's a distraction to get you to look away from this fact right here, that you're going to live forever, and the way to eternal life is through death. Christ has gone through death and broken through. So all of these is just fear not. The most repeated phrase in Scripture. Also, Dale, there are no live lectures. There are live tutoring office hours. But it's what's called an asynchronous course. That means all the lectures are pre-recorded. Assignments are given every Monday and due the next Monday. For those who wish to do a week by week rather than go at your own pace, you're given a small assignment. It's called a check-in assignment that counts for attendance. Those who are going at their own pace don't get that and don't have to worry about that. And so what we're at the process right now is we're just basically taking a vote on right now I'm free Monday through Thursday evenings and Sunday evenings, what works best as far as people's schedule for live office hours, and then we choose that. So it's possibly like Wednesday night or something like that. Those who can't make it, it's recorded and given to them. The Pritchard edition, I think it's the 4th edition. Yeah, we have this icon painted. And it's okay to call icons paintings. Like, people get all spurred out about saying written. We'll have our resident, by the way, I forgot to tell you, our resident iconographer who's doing the rest of the repairs will be present finishing up the iconography at Holy Trinity. That's Shane Swenson. You might have remembered him from last year. He will be there again, so that's an additional bonus. But Shane always says, he always gets upset that when people say you have to call it writing. It's like, no, it's fine to call it painting. What are the essential philosophers or philosophical concepts? Whatever you have as apologists must learn and read. I put a lot of emphasis on the history of philosophy and just kind of knowing the overall kind of conversation from the beginning, from the pre-Socratics, because it's one long conversation, and that kind of helps you, rather than jumping into a particular area, you're not really going to understand the kind of nuances of like, why did this come up? Sometimes it's difficult if you don't take the historical process. It's difficult to see how and why certain philosophers later on are wrong, unless you take a kind of historical approach. So that's, my intro to philosophy, that's what I do. We start with the pre-Socratics. We go into Plato, Aristotle. We go into, especially in later antiquity and scholastic philosophy and theologians, and then into kind of modernity. And so we kind of go through historical. That's really the best way to to understand these issues. Yeah, there's a special way to dispose of icons. It's usually you could bury them or you burn them. Yeah, because most philosophers are very modern and postmodern in their thinking. So this kind of idea of like progress, that antiquity is a bunch of nonsense and was like holding us down from evolving evolutionary consciousness and progress. And so why read the ancients and history of philosophy when obviously we who are further in time are smarter and better and in a better place too. That's usually why oftentimes. All right, let's see. Let me see if we have any more super chats. Pray for me. I have grading this week. All the makeup assignments, final exam papers, projects, they're all due tomorrow night at 11:59. I'll probably start reading through the papers. I have a lot of papers to read through. Grade them. Let's just grade them on the stream right now. I would not put you through that level of torture. All right. What do you want to do? What do you want to go over? Do you want to go back over our... Let's see if we have any on X, if there's any news to cover. We can continue our analysis of the dark triad traits and the virtuous victimhood if you like. That was a fun... I don't understand the question. Do you prefer the teaching aspect? Teaching, by far, yeah. Plato and Aristotle were real people. The thing is, with Aristotle's text, though, a lot of his probably original writings were probably lost and burnt in the Library of Alexandria. This is my collected works of Aristotle. The way they read, too, the way they're structured, looks like the lecture notes. So there's a pretty good theory that these are students' kind of lectures and outlines, the notes of his lectures. But no, they're real. They're definitely real people. All right. There was something I wanted to cover before. Before we go into our... Yeah, I wouldn't worry about the AI, like whatever that guy's thing. It doesn't really. I worry more about. I mean, AI will be used in this and robotics and stuff like that, but biotechnology and um, where the kind of future is going. The brave new world. But all that's going to do is just probably push more of us into opting out, right? Kind of more intentional communities, homestead, like you're not really going to be affected by that stuff. Um, if you're not engaged into it. So if technology gets to the point where it is kind of the problems that were outlined, um, then if you don't want to suffer the negative consequences of that, you're probably going to form off-grid intentional communities that opt out and just don't participate in kind of technology. So and it can't torture you forever, right? It has no power beyond like this particular and again, it's not even clear how it could affect you if you weren't connected to technology in some way, or finances. And so yeah, don't worry about it. That's interesting. So remember the whole like what AI can replace. Interesting enough, if you use AI to like Grok, I asked this question, and then Grok had actually said, how much you can trust this, that philosophy professors would be one that would be very difficult for AI to replace. Now, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. Um, One of my worries is the fact that teaching's already kind of, especially after the COOF and stuff, gone online, and there's the cat's already out of the bag. So it's I have an online asynchronous course, and I would love to be there in person with all of you, but I can't be everywhere in person at the same time in different places. However, you know, I would think it would be very easy for AI, since philosophy professors already have taught stuff, that AI could assemble lectures and actually I mean, if it's pretty successful asynchronous course, like I don't understand why AI wouldn't be able to replace um as far as that kind of level of philosophy. I don't think that um there's a creative element of philosophy in being able to respond to philosophical problems and stuff like that. That's simply, um, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it'd be extremely difficult for AI to actually solve. There's a real kind of human element to that. So in that sense, and then also there's always going to be people who want the real life experience, and that'll be in a lot of areas too. For example, we had talked about uh, certain trades that require, like carpentry or something like that, require unique craftsmanship. They won't be replaced. People desire that. But one of my worries about that is we're already at the point where we're making factory kind of homes. What do they call those? What's that? I can't hear you. Prefabbed homes, yeah. Um, ro- mechanizing in terms of robotics and mass production and stuff like that. I mean, if we're already at the level of kind of like most people would take prefab, it'd be cheaper. Yeah, robotics would certainly, and technology replace craftsmen. And it always costs more for craftsmen, like a unique craftsman and stuff like that. So this was brought up is that, somebody had in one of the streams too, like, well, that's why you got to find a trade because those will never be replaced. And it's like, that's crazy. Like, I don't think completely, but the whole point was the future's changing. You're not guaranteed before, right? Like the loss of kind of value of university and people kind of pushing, well, you got to get a trade. That doesn't mean anything anymore. Because if trades through kind of the way modern technology and mass production and robotics and stuff like that is working, okay, so let's say normally, you go to a trade school, 100 people could get work. Well, the future could be just like, well, 5 of you are going to have work because 95% of it could be replaced by mass production and robotics. So this whole thing that I'm in trade school or like I learned a trade, I'm in a better position, doesn't really hold. You may have a position. There will always be some craftsmanship that's and artisans and stuff like that are required. But the whole thing is, can the majority of it be replaced? Of course it could. Well, I think the same thing with the majority of philosophers could be replaced through, there'll always be some. But yeah, I don't know exactly what is entirely immune from that AI couldn't. Yeah, Searle proved. John Searle has this famous argument, the Chinese room argument. Of course, there's been response to that. I've never been convinced and thought they were actually sufficient responses to his. But there's a whole host of other kind of anti-functional, because all of AI is based on kind of black box functionalism, and kind of ideas of logical behaviorism and stuff like that. So a lot of the kind of irreducibility of consciousness and anti-functionalist arguments have been developed in philosophy of mind are pretty good refutations of AI, because that's only possible if what the functionalists and materialists are actually saying, logical behaviorists and stuff like that. All right, moving on. Yeah, that's a good point too. Robotics can't do repairs on old plumbing and stuff like that, electrical. Yeah, I think that's probably right. But so that's why I said if we start moving in the future of more prefabbed homes and stuff like that, and apartments, I mean, so it's just gonna decrease the need for plumbers and electricians and stuff like that. So some will have the job, but what if in 10 years from now, that's only 10% of the work. So then it's like, well, the rest could just be done because most stuff's like prefab and stuff like that. That's my point. I don't think it'll ever be absolutely eliminated. And so what you'll get is just more new kind of prefabbed homes, and then you'll have probably 10% of handyman working on, and the rest could be done. But that's concerning, right? Think about it. If you live in a city and then only 10 to 15% is kind of old homes that require handiwork, well, what does that mean if there are 1,000 people with plumbing experience? Like, you're not in a great position. All right, let's move to I wanted to see, there was something I wanted to cover, some news, and then we'll go into our analysis of the article. Yeah, what was it I wanted to talk to you about? Oh, I remember. Here's a controversial. Yeah. You guys are going to like this topic. I don't think it'll hold legally. It's going to be thrown out, but it's concerning. The state of Washington, you hear what they just did? It affects Orthodox priests. There are other states that have proposed doing something similar. Oh yeah, Jim Bob's got to come on. Lean into Jim Bob to come up to MontaNIKA too. Like, Colorado's not that far. One thing that I would say about this whole Brave New World that we're entering into, people are so focused on kind of pragmatics of like work and trades, engineering and stuff like that. I mean, let's say 75% of that gets replaced, right? And is Noah Strong points out, there's no career. We're also career minded, and we got to learn a trade, and you got to do it, and that's good. I would say it's certainly good, especially if you have like a homestead, like, and you have property and stuff, like that's something you definitely want to learn. But most of that can be replaced in the future very soon, as far as kind of mass production and stuff like that, and you only now have a few handyman trades that are going to be required. So it puts you in a really different position than it did before of going, should I go into a trade? Is that going to guarantee me? Like, no, it's totally. What it does show, though, is that what was devalued, the humanities, that in some sense are unpractical. Humanities never really has kind of guaranteed you any kind of pay or work or something like that. Although, statistically, people who do learn that are actually, in terms financially and where they go in life, very successful because they've learned kind of strategies. They've received kind of a good education. What I would say is that, but in a kind of scientific, pragmatic, and practical kind of age, those have always been kind of devalued in terms of both financing humanities departments and the disciplines in the humanities. What you do get is a reversal now, is that, well, if the whole idea of pragmatics, what it used to look like, is changing, then the things that weren't pragmatic now are seen to be more valuable, not because they're pragmatic, but because they reach something in you that's truly human. That's why the humanities. That, look, the things of the past don't matter as much. The whole kind of that's all changing. The future is changing. What can't change is human nature, right? I mean, they can try to change it and stuff like that. But what it means to be human, and the humanities and literature and poetry, philosophy and theology, those things that are desirable for its own sake because they improve you, not because you could use things, but because they're an ends in themselves, actually now have more value. And I find that really interesting, is that it's kind of flipping. And that's from, I would say, from an Orthodox point of view, as well as a philosophy instructor, that's definitely a good thing, is that everybody got so concerned about making money and having a trade and having a secure future. When the future is not secure anymore, it returns us back to a time of what are the things that are most important? To become truly human, to find God, and becoming more human is to become more like God. That's really amazing. And so I think that's a positive aspect of something very negative in the coming into the world. I'm sorry, I don't remember that lecture your friend did on AI. Is it posted? I don't remember what you're talking about. Who? Monasticism can be, yeah. Your faith can't be replaced. The things are truly about humanity, right? And when I say that, I don't mean in a secular sense, because again, to become truly human is to become like God. And as St. Demetrius Stanley says, the entire world is called to be humanized, not in a secular sense, but divinized, right? Through the work of, right? So that you are not for the world, but the world is for you. God created this for you to work, right? To bring in the kingdom and incarnate the kingdom of God in all things. That can never be replaced. That's I don't know what that means. Is that the same thing Montana tried to do with priests? I don't know what. I'm missing the whole conversation on that. So we got a friend of mine supposedly did a lecture on AI. I don't know that. And then I don't know what the conversation is about the priests in Montana. Help me out. Oh, cool. Father Valentine spoke on. Now, I would say Montana's a great place to be, and given all this, because the sort of kind of communities and people that actually have ranches that are off grid, like absolutely prepared for this to not be affected by any of this kind of technological revolution of robotics and AI and biotech and stuff like that. And I can't think of a better place, because there are no large cities. Again, Montana's just shy under the size of California. It's huge. And Southern California, think about, right, a third of the size of California has like 30 million. Montana, the size of California, basically has only 1 million people. Our largest city is Billings with 150,000 people. Yet it's not so remote. It's not like Alaska, where Alaska's even larger. It's really difficult to get supplies and be connected to people in Alaska. I would say this is the kind of mean proportional. This is as far out as you can get while still having the benefits of having places still close to you. We have Billings, Helena, Missoula, Kalispell, Bozeman, are all the kind of the cities here. They're not large like our capital here, Helena. This is about 30,000. Butte's about 35,000. It's spread out enough. It's big enough, but close enough still in proximity. Butte's an hour from here. Great Falls is an hour and 15 minutes. Missoula is about an hour 45 minutes. It's still far. Like this is like I can't think of a better place to actually be, given what's actually coming, and just like how thriving Orthodoxy is. We have a monastery here that hopefully construction will be is about 60%, and hopefully we're gonna get some monks, possibly from Mount Athos. And so there's so much potential. I can't think of a better place. But yeah, Alaska just seems too big, too remote. It's too hard to get supplies. The cities are too far apart from each other. So I don't think, yeah, I think Texas is gone. Forgive me for saying, I think there are still some places and ranches in Texas like that, but there's too big of cities. The demographics and the politics has changed too much, so I don't think. I think you want to find a place that doesn't have big cities. Like big cities are like if you have a big city in your state, I think you're in trouble. And if you are living there, you want to be, if this stuff comes, you want to be as far away from that as possible. Yeah, my top list would be, again, no big cities. Um, of course, you want to see in terms of beauty and weather and stuff like that, but like states that really kind of going to be immune from this, probably Wyoming, the Dakotas. Um, Even Idaho has a big city. Like that's why I was encouraging people that I'm like, I don't know if you want to, Boise's a big city. Uh, but still, there's a lot of potential in Idaho and Montana. I mean, you could do if you want to do Alaska. Just like Alaska would be a good place too. It's just really remote and really big. But that would be, I mean, as long as you're away from Anchorage as a big city. I'm trying to think of other candidates. Very remote, um, and no big cities. Those are the first. Some of those states are kind of the ones that. Also, it's going to be harder to kind of infiltrate in terms of politics and ideologies. Um, when things are really spread out and there aren't any large cities, that's kind of a buffer. Question: when I see Jay discussing atheists, he talks about atheists not being able to account things like the external world of me. Um, it's Descartes. So all the questions in modernity that arise that are really good questions of skepticism, you can't actually, from a secular point of view, actually prove that there's an external world, that you're not locked inside your head. The problem of other minds, the problem of induction, identity over time, all these philosophical problems that come up in skepticism, stuff like that, the atheist doesn't even think about for some reason. And it's like, yeah, you can't actually answer that from not only an atheist point of view, but anything actually outside of the Christian worldview. So they just hand wave that stuff like, oh, whatever. But that's fundamentally destructive, like because they're assuming these things with and using them in their arguments to argue against you when they can't actually account for it or justify that you're not in a simulation or you're not in your head, and or a brain in the vat is another one. Yeah, questions are allowed. We're taking questions. Feeling the Wolf donates £2. Thank you so much. That's a difficult question, Ewart. How should I just so Ewart mapping has a question about a reader. It's towing. It's getting a bit too close, right? It's treading dangerous waters. There is no such thing as a woman tonsured a reader. There have been. It is in some cases a very rare, might have been allowed in the church if there was not a male present or something like that. I mean, obviously, women monastics read epistles and do readings and stuff like that. But there is no such thing as a woman reader. So there's no canon strictly forbidding a woman from reading an epistle. However, I'd say it's quite dangerous given the kind of times that we live in, because there's an ideology to basically confuse the kind of gender roles within the church and push for female priesthood and diaconate. In light of that, it blurs the distinction. So if we didn't live in kind of these woke postmodern times and stuff like that, and and there was rare situations that it's like that might be needed, that could be allowed. But I think it's a terrible idea to have female altar servers. It blurs the distinction between gender roles theologically and liturgically, and they know what they're doing. Like, there's people that have an eye. It's not just, oh, we're just gonna allow that. Like, they want full blown abolition of the distinctions between the roles and gender theologically. So I would say, that's extremely dangerous. What is coming? I don't know. That's the whole that's what produces a lot of kind of anxiety. And thanks, Hush Jones, $4.99. Times past, you could anticipate, a lot of things. I mean, the further you go back, the easier it is to kind of anticipate the next kind of decade and where we're kind of headed and stuff like that. But the fact that everything's speeding, the way that technology and the technological age that we live that's unique, and how fast that we can't keep up, has basically destroyed, has made us blind to where we're even gonna, what society's even gonna look like in the next 2 years, let alone 10 years. So we don't know. It could be a nothing burger. Like, this stuff could collapse. Like, that's the problem, is that it's so new and it's so fast, and we have no time to actually study and really kind of know what it's doing, anticipate, that we actually can't say. And there's far too much information to process, so I have no idea where. I know what the Orthodox prescription is. We keep what always has been kept. Again, I think that as technology and biotech and AI becomes more problematic, I think that it'll just naturally force more Orthodox Christians back into kind of an opting out lifestyle, kind of a more natural, kind of older lifestyle of being off the grid, and intentional communities and monastic communities and stuff like that, where, and you're already starting to see that. Well, morality, Christ is Lord, can't be. I've never heard anybody argue morality is an emergent phenomenon. Mind and consciousness can be. Um, However, keep in mind, as I always bring out, um, emergentism in philosophy of mind is no friend of the atheist or materialist. Those were developed to actually refute materialism and functionalism and stuff like that. So, there are Christians that believe that are emergentists. I used to be an emergentist. The most famous one is Timothy O'Connor. Oh. Ooh, excuse me. I would probably say Bernard, as far as Roman Catholics, Neo-Thomists and stuff like that. Bernard Lonergan, that's what I wrote my thesis on, is an emergentist. So what emergentist is that there are certain kind of necessary material conditions that are required. Obviously, you can't get, cake without eggs and flour and stuff like that. But so what the emergentist looks at is there's different kind of levels in nature. Either those are properties or actually real substances that are not identical with the material parts. They can't be reduced to them. They're novel properties. And the emergence of novel entities or properties. Furthermore, not only can it not ontologically be reduced, so you see the difference? Yeah, you may be required to have a brain to engage in certain mental activities, but every emergentist would say that mind is not brain. It's an emergent phenomenon or entity or property that is ontologically distinct from the material parts. It's subvening base, right? It just says emergentists would say that at some level it needs the material parts, but it never can be ontologically reduced. Furthermore, in terms of epistemology, there's nothing in the material parts that can predict emergent phenomena. That's why they call it novel. So when things come together in a certain way, there's nothing in those material parts or the substrate or subvening base that will tell you, no matter how much you know them and study all the material parts and matter, that when coming together in this certain way, that it'll produce something. And so emergentism, whether you agree with it or not, is a great refutation against materialists and atheists. So I'd lean into it and be like, hey, I'm not an emergentist, blah, 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 but if you say emergent, let's go with that, you're refuted. They're all anti-materialist arguments, anti-reductive, anti-identity theory and stuff like that. Now, I would argue that given the Orthodox view of forms and universals and how God creates things, and my rejection of theistic evolution is reasons why I don't accept it. But I don't think there's, in kind of more generic version of Christianity, that's why you get people like this. So, unless you're, Orthodox, like, there wouldn't be anything incompatible with Christianity itself, and kind of a generic version with emergentism. Do they reject epiphenomenalism? No, not necessarily. You could be an emergentist and an epiphenomenalist. A lot of them do, because they want to maintain a causal efficacy of the higher. But epiphenomenalism is a form of emergentism. That you get it's just that all epiphenomenalism is the things that emerge out of the lower subvening base don't do anything. They have no causal efficacy. No, I don't think it's a deal, but if the people were, unless there's other things like, yeah, it's not good. Unless there's kind of more serious thing, I wouldn't say that's a deal breaker. I'd say like it's not good. But yeah. All right. Other questions? No, there's nobody that's most important for tag or like. The only thing in that sense is like if you want to learn skeptical arguments to use against it, like yeah, we'll read the arguments and skepticism. But those arguments for skepticism go all the way back to the Pyrrhean skeptics and Agrippa and different people too. There's nothing new on. All right, let's go to the other controversy. This is going to blow your mind. Washington governor signs abuse bill requiring priests to break sealed confession. Have you heard this one? Father Thomas Soroka states, of course, clergy are mandatory reporters. Also, as a professor, I'm a mandatory reporter. So I need to inform students if they tell me something in confidentiality. First of all, I'm just a deacon, so I don't do confessions. But telling me as a professor or clergy member something in confidentiality, if it's regarding this kind of stuff, this kind of abuse, I am a mandatory reporter. And I have to inform them, before you tell me this, I'm a mandatory reporter and I have to report this to the state. Okay. But that's different than confession. It's uncanonical, and you could be defrocked, and we'll talk about the dangers. No priest can actually be a mandatory reporter in the confessional. Right? The sealed confession is actually held in confidentiality. And this has made everybody super upset. You should be able to. But let's talk a little bit about this. Do you guys have any questions about just what this means? It will destroy confession. And remember, in the various communist regimes, like the Ceausescu regime, they passed laws to actually, you had to report what they wanted you to report and break the seal of confession. And obviously, what that means is people stop confessing. So nobody's going to confess anything if they think they could be turned in. I doubt that this... I don't even think this will go to the Supreme Court. It'll go to probably the Supreme Court of Washington being thrown out, but it just shows you the mindset of the secularists and what they want to do. Obviously, they don't. It's not because they care about the children and stuff like that. It's a way for them to get in and destroy the church. Yeah, and they never attack other religions. The way they would enforce this, they probably put spies in. Like, for example, when they passed, like, laws... Didn't it used to be... It's crazy. Tobacco used to be... I remember there was a time when it was 16. Then it moved to 18. Now it's 21. Okay? And when these laws kind of came in, right, 18 to 21, and with tobacco products, and then, you know, it's always been, you know, for a long time, alcohol, you have to be 21. What did they do? They got police young people and go in and basically try to purchase products, tobacco or alcohol products that were without, you know, carding, and then they busted them. So I imagine that would be one way they would attempt to, fake confessors. They would undercover, basically. I'm trying to think of other ways they could monitor. I think once that would come in, then like they would start requiring that like all kinds of stuff from the confession be revealed, so they could determine whether it fits into an abuse case or something like that. Now I want to read. People are so stupid. They're very emotional, but it is an emotional topic, right? I mean, we have a duty to protect the children. Now, as Father Thomas says, no priest would give absolution. A priest, if this was confessed, would withhold absolution until they turn themselves in and would work with them to turn that in. They can do that. But anything that's confessed cannot be... And by the way, you can't confess something you haven't done. If you're like, I'm going to murder somebody, like, that's not protecting confession, right? It's things that you have done. Not, well, I'm going to do this, right? People always get that. I don't know why this is so hard for people to process. It's like, no, you can't confess something that you haven't done yet and expect absolution. This pacing said, a priest or mandatory would include confession. No, it does not. That was the whole point. It does not. As Father Thomas Soroka points out, the priests are trained to handle those cases in different ways, which include withholding any absolution until they turn themselves in to the authorities. Priests will also assure them they will accompany them throughout the process and counsel them intensely face-to-face the temporal consequences of their actions. This does not in any way mean that the priests take CA or any crime lightly. It means they uphold the confessional. Also, it's so stupid, too, is that people don't realize... I had somebody, and I don't even do confessions. Some stupid lady on Twitter or something was, like, calling me an abuser or something like that, because I was defending the confessional, and they were like, you'd enable these things. And I'm like, I don't even do this. But first of all, you know what the very first consequence of this would be? Again, none of these people would confess. And I think she was thinking about priests who are abusers too. If they confess, or you turn them in. I'm like, well, all right, suppose we go with you and be like, yeah, you have to actually mandatory report that. It doesn't do anything. This law does not do anything, because then, of course, first of all, I doubt somebody engaged in, like, it would be really rare somebody engaged at this level of sin. They're probably a sociopath, narcissist, and got some serious problems. I doubt they would even confess this stuff. Okay? Those that would no longer, if they knew that, well, I'm just going to be turned in. Right? So what practical effect would this law even have? Like, it doesn't save anybody. It doesn't save anybody from being abused. Like, I think it would just encourage abuse the other way, right? This is so funny. I don't understand why people... So this gentleman says, thank you to Father... I may be fine for an abuser has some moral compass, but what if I... By the very definition, sociopaths and psychos don't go to confession. I wish somebody would point that out. And Father Thomas takes it a different direction, says, I think it's a false dichotomy. One can uphold the sanctity of confession, honor, protect. Yeah, it isn't an either or. You can protect the children while upholding the sanctity of the confession will not be a mandatory reporter. This guy says, okay, devil's advocate here. How does that help the victim? Because I would actually argue, if you did that, you would make it impossible to actually help victims. You would enable abusers. You would cut off the way for them to actually get help. They would keep that even more private. But we have things in place. Like, they could actually be banished from the parish. Like, they're not allowed to be around children. They're not so that's another false dichotomy. Simply preserving the confessional, encouraging them to turn themselves in and having, that doesn't hurt the victim. It actually helps the victim. We put the situation in a place where we can actually help victims. Person plays devil's advocate again. Well, there's consequence. I mean, absolution doesn't mean we'll put you back in the same place of. Again, they would not get. You would withhold communion. They would not get absolution until they turned themselves actually in. It's actually fairly easy to encourage somebody to, if somebody's at the point where they're actually going to confess that, it's going to be pretty easy for the priest to guide them into doing the right thing and turning themselves in. So, and then once they turn themselves in, they're not going to be in a position to be able to legally to repeat that same behavior. So they're bringing in other issues like alcohol and stuff. It's just a red herring. It's missing the point too. Also, great point. Father Thomas says he's going to play devil's advocate, but how do you determine which crimes are going to go to the authorities and which ones not? And it is a slippery slope. That's the problem. Whatever good that you think you're doing, which I just showed, it's not going to do anything. I think it's going to further make it difficult to actually help the victims if you did something like this. And then the collateral damage and the slippery slope is going to be far worse. You're going to be turning in all kinds of people. Nobody is going to be like, it is so devastating what would actually happen with this. Yeah, and people are just calling this out. It's going to be thrown out. Anyways, that's kind of what's going on. I'm not too worried about it. I don't think it'll even, it'll get thrown out in the Washington Supreme Court, but it shows you what the leftist woke mindset. And it's always, and this is a good transition into the paper that we're reviewing. They always use the virtuous victimhood, right? And cloak it in this kind of moral language like, oh, the left and liberals care for the poor and the disenfranchised. They absolutely do not. Most of them. And those who do, I think they're just brainwashed by, oh, if somebody says they care for the poor and the disenfranchised and the children, that they do. I mean, just look at any city run by Democrats. Like, does it look like they care for the, like, I mean, apart from platforms and what they run on an ideology and stuff like that, why would anybody vote for it? Like, they're literally pragmatically the worst for the disenfranchised and the poor and the suffering. Like, and liberal Democrats are just so dumb, the majority of the voters, that like they just believe if somebody tells them that. That's what I can't understand with Democrats, the majority. Boomer Democrats, like look at their cities. What's the matter with you people? Like, obviously, pragmatically, whatever they're lying to you. It doesn't work. Absolutely crazy. I think Republicans have problem. There's no way anybody in the right mind could say that. Like, again, I'm no fan of Republicans, but like they're nowhere near both the way in acting, thinking, and policies compared to Democrats. Like, that's insane. That I don't know how somebody could. They don't have like, and part of that, like even if there's bad, like the ideologies, the kind of underlying. This is why you got to roll it back, and not just look at like, well, there's this guy, and then he did, and she said this, and then just try to. This is what Roman Catholics do with Orthodox. Well, you guys have problems too. Roll it back to fundamental presuppositions. There's a reason why they're not moral equivalents. Whatever problems Republicans and conservatives, and I'm not a Republican conservative, so I can make these critiques of both. I think one is far more dangerous and has much more problems because systemic ideas, because of kind of prior presuppositions. That's where I always go. That's why I never in politics like to go like, well, you have this guy and you have this guy. This is exactly what Roman Catholic. Well, you have and the Bishop of Alexandria or allowed a female diac. Like, you're missing the greater point. The two systems are fundamentally different, and they're not moral equivalents whatsoever. Roman Catholicism and Orthodoxy. And I think you could actually numerically add up and be like, whatever dumb Republicans are, there's far more like dangerous dumb Democrats than. I think that would be pretty easy to. But I don't ever care to go into those. Nobody will ever accept. Like, they'll just reinterpret. And it's kind of stupid libertarian ideas to be like, well, both sides are bad. So I reject that. I'm like, no, like, yeah, I definitely have critiques of Republicans and conservatives. And what they're going to be is in terms of kind of, probably certain Enlightenment presuppositions, uh, kind of, kind of background beliefs and stuff like that. But they're no way like equivalent ideologically. And that's where I always like to go in terms of politics rather than um and it's, yeah, the GOP is like, I'm not saying it's good. There's serious like that's why I'm not a Republican. Like I don't um but you got to kind of understand kind of mac of it, like you have to use political parties to destroy like more evil and more dangerous ideologies. And so I think left and Democrats far more dangerous. And like, yeah, I hope eventually you could shed off the kind of stupid modern like classical liberalism ideas, libertarian ideas, and the GOP get rid of that and stuff like that. But just got to be like smart. You got to read Machiavelli and be smarter about like deal with the most dangerous kind of ideas first and get rid of and you know the enemy of your enemy is your friend. You got to use those. That's no endorsement of like that kind of, and I can trace back like Republican GOP like ideas to Margaret Thatcher and classical liberal like and all these, and it's dumb. It is like um but again, it's naive to think that like all parties and ideas are equal in their danger and destruction, like, and that you wouldn't use a party that you don't endorse to be like, yeah, like if that's what's important, use them to destroy the what's classical liberalism. Let me see if I can get a good definition. I think that like conservatives and Republicans are founded in what's called classical liberalism, um, and it emphasizes it's just stupid Enlightenment ideas of individual liberty, economic freedom, limited government, um, and so I think you have stuff tied to like John Locke and stuff like that. So ultimately, these are principles that are not orthodox, um, like because they entail certain things about the individual and the human being that's not correct from an orthodox point of view. Um, I think that also one of the problems with these kind of what we'd say on the right, like Republicans and that um, that is extremely problematic is because of these ideas founded in classical liberalism of individual liberty, economic freedom, and limited government. It's both in its promotion and removing of any obstacles to prevent international banking. So international banking capitalism. So I don't mean like at a local level free trade. Like we all know who I'm talking about. I don't want to get this, but the world bankers and stuff like that. I think both sides, the left, liberals and conservatives, have promoted that in different, allowed that in different ways. That's why I would say that, in principle, fascism is not like a pro like fascism was a historical response to both those kinds of sides. International socialism, right? So internet, and how was that funded? By international bankers, right? And then uh, international banking, international capitalism, and stuff like that. So both of those, right? So historically, if you read how fascism emerged, was to be a nationalism, right? The mean between those two extremes. And that word has got a dirty word and stuff like that, and we can critique, various elements of. Again, it itself comes out of kind of Enlightenment ideas, but if keep in mind that basically what you have now is kind of like a response would be some sort of kind of nationalism is like the mean proportional is a response between capitalism and like international socialism and stuff like that. I don't think that in itself is a problem. I think so that's really interesting. A lot of this, and there's another course that I should do, is the political philosophy class. So maybe if you're against the Republicans and Democrats, you're actually a lot closer to fascism than you actually think. Again, it's just too vague. It's too vague a description to the whole beholden to donors and stuff. That's how politics works. So you got to play in terms of could it be used? Could it be used to destroy the most kind of destructive and evil side? And again, so I'd roll that back to, like I said, I can make a critique of both sides ideologically and politically, but like I definitely would want to see the left and Democrats destroyed before, and then you could deal with the rest later. Deal with the most immediate threat. And let's look in terms of ideologies and the kind of thinkings that that make one side far more dangerous. And because what I don't see is stupid and whatever the like beholden the Republicans are in Congress or something like that, they don't have the same kind of way of thinking as we were isolating and evaluating in this article. And there's reason why for that. All right, virtuous victimhood. Well, it showed it was, so I don't. All right. I know, sorry. It was, though, I promise. Oh, it isn't? Oh, cool. Thank God. All right. Like I said, so somebody had asked me about politics. Like, again, I don't think I'll ever get anywhere by saying, like, you know, ever showing somebody that, you know, I mean, how would I ever even convince, like, an adept that there's far more bad Democrat senators than are, like, there's no way to do it. Like, if you're already skeptical of that, there's no amount of evidence that And so I'm going to avoid that conversation. I don't think it's helpful. I want to go back to kind of more fundamental presuppositions and ideologies that we can critique. So we could just ignore that. And once you kind of understand what's going on, then you'll be able to identify where that is. Here is a person that's displaying that. And whatever problems you might have with the Republicans or something like, you do not tend to get this kind of tactic. Why is that? Why don't you see, as dumb as Republicans can be and as stupid and bad things they can do, I want to get you to see, why aren't they using virtuous victimhood? So I'm just going to ignore that conversation. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, again, any more than when in my philosophy class I tell students, I'm not going to tell you who's right and who's wrong, which person to believe. I'm not here to teach you what to think, but how to think. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll that back to more kind of fundamental ideas. Once we start learning this stuff, I really believe, with an open heart and open mind, that you will be able then to make informed decisions. Once you understand these ideologies, you'll be able to see it, identify it. That's what I'm doing. That's how I teach philosophy. And there's a level of respect and autonomy there that I don't have to tell you, and argue with you got to vote for this guy. Like, all I do is just train you and teach you and philosophy, political ideologies, things like this, to equip you. You'll be much better at identifying and making better decisions. And I think that's fair. So rather than get bogged down to the details, which is never effective, let's go into kind of some of these more fundamental problems and issues. Now, what I would say is, I certainly think that you will find dark triad traits, Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy. I prefer to probably use sociopathy in the right, and especially politicians. Okay, but that's not particularly what I'm interested in. What you don't find is virtuous victimhood. So we can have both sides dark triad traits. What we're interested here, though, is the connection between virtuous victimhood and why this is occurring in Western modern countries, okay? And its connection to. One of the things, too, to keep in mind is, and I can't remember the book, Dissident Mama Rebecca sent it to me. I still got to read it. But, look, let's do this. Let's turn the camera back on so I can see you. Just as I took Republicans in the right, I'm going to trace them back to, and this is all I want to do. I'll let you make your own decisions on this and how you should vote and stuff. That's up to you. I'm a philosopher and do philosophy of history in this sense. Where did they come from? Let's just trace the lines. I would say certainly you get neocons that go back to the Trotskyites. You also have the neocons from Strauss, both the East and West Coast, Chicago and Claremont, influencing in conservatism, and all of this also trace back to, I would say, the right in terms of the French Revolution, the reaction to the Jacobites, as well as classical liberalism, as I just pointed out. We can do the same with the left, too. I think that's good. Let's just start there, and that's all you need to learn is, where do these ideas come from? How are they influenced? And keep in mind, too, that the modern Democrats and liberals is a amalgamation of different kind of ideas and has kind of obviously merged and changed quite a bit. Obviously, the old Democrats, nothing like what Democrats are today, and we can actually trace those ideas. But like, well, it's because of this influence. This idea came in here. All right. But one of the things that, in terms of understanding the modern Democrat, the modern liberal, and the modern left, is this comes out of New England and the Puritans. That's an important, and there's a really important book about that. And let's see if I can find Rebecca's message. Problem is I can't remember. Did she send it on me in Telegram? Probably. Dissident. I think it's called The Honorable Cause. Maybe that's it. Jehovah's Thickness. 10 euros, thank you. Help me respond to this. Necessarily pray to the... Yeah, I'll talk about that in just a second, but let me... How do I plug this? I'm going to send... Okay, copy. I got to go from my phone to... my email and then pull it up on the screen. Oh, wait, no, I don't. I got too much. Why come up so dumb? Alright, Disney Mama. Awesome. This is cool. Coming to America. I'm just going to plug this in, Mama, Rebecca, if you're in. The book itself is probably mentioned in here, but you can go to Distant Mama's site there. This is about the Puritans. And basically this is about... So this is kind of what we're talking about. This is the reason why I'm bringing this up. You don't get moralizing in Republicans and conservatives and the right. And this is because the neoliberal barrel went to further pontificate. Oh, let's see. Funny that. Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. It's ironic because they obviously accuse the right of moralizing, but in fact, the virtuous victimhood and the fake piety, moral signaling and stuff like that, it comes out of the left and Democrats. And so you can read. And this is interesting too. Like, yeah, it gives a historical context in the terms of England. And think about the stupid story we were told about the Puritan. America was founded on the Puritans, and they were suffering religious persecution from that mean old nasty Church of England that came over, had Thanksgiving with the Indians, and established freedom of religion. Nobody tells you that, like, they're a total weirdo cult. And here you get, by the late 1500s, 1600s, there was a growing faction of Anglicans that become disillusioned with the state ecclesial system. Influenced greatly by Calvin's Protestant teachings. So you can tie all these things in here. Christians push for a simplified church worship, challenged what they deemed as an apostasy, the Anglican hierarchy. So notice, I think you could actually trace back in the left this kind of radical egalitarianism to a couple different ideas, but anti-hierarchical to the Puritans, right, that are anti-hierarchical. They wanted themselves to shed liturgy. So where do we get ideas of progressivism, right? Are you to conserve traditions and values, traditional roles, or do you progress past those because they are a millstone around your neck, or they're holding you down? And so let's reject hierarchy, let's embrace radical egalitarianism, but still keeping what? A rigid moral kind of law, a pure spiritual life, and those people became known as Puritans. They're anti-monarchical, right? Anti-monarch. Another widespread misbelief is that the Puritans were seeking religious tolerance. Nope. These Puritans were really working toward was not freedom of religion, but rather freedom from other religions. And she talks about this in terms of orthodoxy too. You get And so these were New Englanders. So the other thing too is you have to understand where did the Democrats and liberals come in terms of geography in the history is New England. Keep in mind Maryland was Catholic. You had different southern states as Protestant and Catholic. I'm trying to get to the... Here it is. Part 3. Progressive unfolding. Also, this explains a lot to why the left and liberals often represent the South. I think she goes with such disdain and hate and kind of characterize the South as precisely portrays as rigid totalitarianism, rational asceticism. Yeah, keep in mind too, secular holidays come from the Puritans. So you can draw out all the secularism actually goes back. That the left and wokists are promoting goes back to actually the Puritans. Made it a breeding ground for progressive ethos. The whole social justice thing comes out of... It's good that she ties this to the Enlightenment. All right, so we'll stop there. You can get some ideas, but I can't remember the actual book that you want to read that documents all this is... have to get for you. I think it's this book, The Honorable Cause, if I'm... No, that's not it. All right, I'll get it for you. Let's just see if you have any questions, super chats. Before I go into that, let me answer Jehovah's thickness right there. What you want to do is you want to go to on my academia.edu. And you're going to find this paper. Or it might be on Patristic Faith. Let me look on Patristic Faith. On my articles. No, come on, dude. Come on, man. Contributors. I'm a contributor. That's me. Found it. It's just kind of funny. Pick here that I made Aquinas' 5 Proofs for Allah, an Orthodox Critique of Natural Theology. So here is where you want to go. Basically, this lays out, and I worked and was inspired by Gerby. You can find his. Let me see if I can get you his article that he wrote. Theistic Fallacies. And in this article, basically show that, and prove through logic that there's no generic God in terms of referencing either logically or semantically through our words. There's no lowest common denominator, which has the implication then that if that's true, simply because you can get 5 things that are common attributes among the Muslim, the Jew, and the Christian about what they call God isn't enough to determine that we're actually worshiping or talking about the same entity. And because if it were, then I should be able to, and I show this logically, that if it is the same entity in logic, I can do substitution. And the problem is, and here's, I give 9 common denominator. This is what Richard Schwimmer calls the theist corollary. And if I grant that, it's still not enough to determine, because God's not a rigid designator, nor is it a proper name. As I say here, what I can show is that even if you get these 9 things common, you're not talking about the same entity. And I show logically through substitutions how this ends up fallacious. If I assume that and these are what Gerby calls the theistic fallacy. And all of it's the assumption. Judaism believes one and only one God. Christianity believes one and only one God. Islam believes in one and only God. There is only one God. Therefore, Judaism and Christianity believe in the same one God, or worship it. If that's true, then I can show you exactly how the logic of that breaks down. Ahmed believes there is one and only one solution to the math problem. Isaac believes there's only... I should have used Shlomo. Shlomo believes that there's only one and only one solution to the math problem. John believes there's only one and only one solution to the math problem. Therefore, there is only one and only one solution to the math problem, does it follow, therefore, that Ahmed, Shlomo, and John all believe in the same solution? Clearly not. And I go through a whole bunch of substitution arguments too. Aristotle believed in God. God is a Trinity. If it's the same thing, I should be able to substitute and get to the conclusion. Therefore, Aristotle believed in the Trinity. So you want to actually look at this article where I prove and I actually show too how things are actually determined as far as their referent. In terms of what's called long conditionals and determined by the... This is all messed up, actually. This isn't even somehow... I don't even think that's the... See how this is 6 and... Wait, hold on, let me see. I want to see something real quick. If I come here to academia.edu, this might be a better... better place to... It might just... the reason I'm saying that I think there might be some formatting problems in that. But you can come here. Almost all my articles are here. I think it's a better place to find it. Yeah, and the formatting's better. So that answers your question there. These are logical proofs here that there is no same referent. We do not worship the same God. In fact, I'll argue later that they're not even referring to anything other than a fictional concept that they made up in their mind. There is actually no entity that the Talmudic Jew or Muslim actually hits in reality. Okay, so hopefully, thank you for your super chat. Hopefully that answers your question there. Let me look and see if we have any more super chats. Okay, the last one was Jehovah's Thickness. Answered that. Did I miss anybody else's? I think I got everybody. All right, let's go back to... the moralizers, the Pharisees, the virtuous victimhood. Third, a virtue signal is also like to increase observers' perceptions of the signaler's deservingness. A good person who has experienced misfortunes and disadvantages of various kinds is more likely to elicit distress and sympathy. So that's one of the things why this originally came up, is I was seeing, even Orthodox coming on Twitter and criticizing me, and using what? Victimhood, this is being mean to this person. Well, how is this going to win somebody over? This is so mean to call out heresy. Protestants might be offended by that. How is that? What that is an emotional manipulation. Why? Because either for me to elicit sympathy, oh man, you're right. I feel guilty. I have sympathy for the heresies or the group that I'm criticizing, and therefore I change my position. Not because it's true or I shouldn't, but simply because of emotional manipulation. And also, I think that they were doing this to win over the audience, right? Not by reason, logic, or arguments, or because it was true, but because, well, they possibly could display dark triad traits. They want to win. That's why I said these people don't care anything about the poor, the disenfranchised, the hungry, the poor Protestants and their heresies and stuff like that. They're insecure, they're narcissists, and they want to actually win, but they're not going to use the traditional, respectable, established rules of logic and argumentation, debate, and truth, because they're a narcissist, and they're going to use instead manipulation. I was talking with Father Russell about who's giving a talk, doing a workshop at MontaNIKA on narcissism, and he said he gave an example of something indicative of a narcissist. Cop pulls a person over for something and basically like gonna arrest them or whatever, and what they do is they say, but I need to see my mother. Well, that's not what the conversation was about. What they're using is they actually are illogical. They go off what's actually the options on the table and what's actually being discussed, and what do they do? There's a red herring, but in terms of appeal to emotion to manipulate you to get you what. So it's not actually a logical category, because that's not even what the conversation was about. So they actually do a logical fallacy. Why do they do it, though? Is because it's indicative of narcissism. They want to manipulate you. And so I thought that was an interesting... They want to elicit, oh, poor me, why am I going to... Okay, a bad person is unlikely to evoke these reactions or the following alternative temporal path. Someone who remains a good person despite experiencing bad things is more likely to spark a desire in observers to reward. Blah, blah, blah. The preceding arguments lead us to propose the ability to extract resources from others through the use of significance maximize observers perceive a singular as being a virtuous victim. And again, we do not doubt that the substantial portion of the victims admitted in everyday life convey legitimate victimization experiences of people who would be described as those who know them as virtuous. However, just as there are honorable people who experience misfortune, there are also those who might feign both suffering and virtue to get something they want. And by the way, what I talked about too is there's a couple different things. You'll never hear the good person, the good man, say, but I'm a decent person, I'm a good person. The holy person, the saint, doesn't victimize. Oh, I'm underprivileged. I'm owed something. Poor me. So oftentimes, they are, oftentimes poor people in bad situations. But notice it's usually the person that has vice that draws attention to that. Now, we all have that at some level, right? And so we have to assess ourselves, am I just conditioned? I want to get better. I go into confession all the time to identify the vices I have and get better. But we need to isolate, too, that, well, it's a sign, and then we have to look, what is the person doing that? Is it just because they're in a bad habit and have a particular vice or something like that? Or are they a Machiavellian narcissist that... they do not care. They're not good people. Not only are they not good people, they want to manipulate you. And so they will, but I'm a good person. I've just had this bad, terrible thing happen to me and stuff. because they only care about getting money and resources or some sympathy from you. It talks about insignificant behaviors are costly, especially if they're deceptive. Therefore, a really sophisticated person, and again, this is what I noticed on Twitter too, the attempt to hide the crime. So a more sophisticated approach is to utilize both victim and virtue signaling, right? And that's why a lot of people fall for this. Somebody who's much more sophisticated, right? But look, if you deal with this stuff all the time, you get better, and these sorts of people, especially online, with spotting it. What do I actually say? I'm obviously as clergy a lot more gentle and stuff, but like everybody always goes after Jay for being so mean and stuff like that. What you don't realize, how long have you been watching and how much of his material, okay? If you start watching enough, you start realizing, like, oh, I get it. Here's the same sort of person, or the actual same person, over and over again. And the more you deal with it, the more you can just pick it up right away. Be like, okay, here we go. Here is exactly a dark triad trait person coming in to... Yeah, so this mentality that I think is uniquely associated with the left, again, that's not to excuse conservatism behavior, but like, you don't tend to get that. But what's dangerous, though, is that these woke ideas are actually coming into the church, even to people who may not be like liberal Democrats or the left or something like that. I'm like, that's a problem. And so this is why it's really important to identify, rather than getting down into the kind of nuts and or the minutia that really isn't, we're not going to be able to argue through unless we go to kind of more fundamental ideas. It's better to go back to these kind of, like, what are the dominating ideologies of a certain political group? Where did they come from, and how is that happening? Now you understand, you can identify it. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't think so. Not. Could it be a cause of concern? Like, again, I think the problem is this comes up a lot in like theological conversations or something. Somebody frames something that's too general that can't be answered. Maybe not. Like, it's you got to get much more specific about it's the details and those kinds of things that actually matter. I could think of ways in which it might not. It depends on why. All the details matter. But probably would be absolutely a red flag. Like, generally, I'd probably be like, well, why is that actually? Also, I would say the biggest threat right now is, and not everybody in the right and Republicans are on board. Some are, but the biggest threat is probably globalism. These internationalists and globalism aside, like, and I would just definitely say that, yeah, you might have a mixed bag with Republicans, but the Democrats are the party of globalism. That's why I said you're getting distracted in red herrings. Be like, identify the greatest threat and eliminate that politically. That's what. Everything else is red herrings. Deal with it later. So you're not being strategic in the way that you're thinking, but like, well, these guys have this, but it's like, of course they do. Identify what is the single greatest threat right now, that we have already talked about this, is globalism. And these different kind of forms on either side, whether it's international banking capitalism or international socialism, is in terms of couched in other ideologies of technocracy and globalism. So anything that's WHO, UN, World Economic Forum, that's connected in any way. Like, I identify what are the greatest threats, the triadic, like these kinds of groups, Davos and stuff like that. Um, in terms of science too, how this works, like that by far is the greatest threat. So, as far as the details, like politically, if you were going to vote and stuff, like it doesn't. Don't get bogged down into the details. Also, it's a type of puritanicalism, so you already have kind of a left wing, or liberal kind of ideology that, well, it's morally contaminated, so I can't touch it. The whole world is morally contaminated. This is a puritanical idea that, and it's just not practical. It's not strategic whatsoever. Identify the greatest threats, okay, and don't get lost in the details. Don't be like, well, this person, they got bad senators and I can't. Well, that person supports. I found a Republican that supports Skittles and stuff like that. Be like, yeah, the enemy of the enemy is your friend. Use it, then deal with it later. That's what I'm saying. That's a pretty good strategy. Quit being such a romantic kind of ideologue and puritanical, and the think you'd be like, oh, I can't. Well, there's problems. Like, this is typically what young Zoomers have. This kind of idea in terms of politics. That I'd encourage you to read Machiavelli. I'm not saying become a support Machiavelli, but it gives you an idea of like how kind of strategy works and stuff like that. And one of Machiavelli's points is don't become so ideological and puritanical that you can't get anything done. And then you have a much bigger problem, right? A bigger enemy than... And that doesn't mean that you're like... That's my whole point. Doesn't mean you're conservative or Republican. It means you're mature and wise and savvy. Doesn't mean... I think people are so worried to get branded, well, that I'm a... It's like, you don't have... Like, again, doesn't mean you're endorsing a party or something like that. To be pragmatic, to identify what's the greatest threats right now. What would you guys say in the chat? What's one of... Ideologically, we talked about this early. Ideologically and politically are the greatest threat that we face today. I had a thought that's kind of related to this. Here's a... Stupidity is the greatest. Stupidity isn't. Stupidity combined with Funko Pops. No, stupidity combined with extreme arrogance. So, like that I see displayed in evangelicals. So everything that you're listing in the chat right there is championed by Democrats and the left. That's globalism. That's what I'm saying, is that even if you might find globalists in the Republican or conservative platform party, it's not everything. It's not the party platform. Get it? The difference? Here's some bad... I mean, that's where you even get like rhinos from. Republican name. Look at what does the party stand for? What is like pragmatically what, like, there's one party that's the party of globalism, transhumanism, and all the stuff, like the major problem. Like, I don't understand. Like, I don't care. Vote for whoever to give, like, whatever, combat that. Doesn't mean you endorse that. Those, like, just be, I'm going to give an analogy. And this is just nuance. Again, me tolerating or even preferring one party or group or ideology other than another doesn't mean that I don't see problems with that. Now, let me give you an analogy. Religion. All of them, except for orthodoxy, is incorrect. Correct. They're not all equal, though. In fact, if I ask you this question, I've thought about it too. Who would you rather live next to? In terms. So, you don't get the option of orthodox. Who would be more tolerable to, as bad as the system is and problems that they have? A Muslim, a Jew, a Roman Catholic, a non-denominational evangelical, or a Skittles Anglican. It's kind of similar, right? That's kind of the way that I view politics. I'm like, well, I could tolerate some groups a lot more than others. Especially if I had to live. Oddly enough, all right, I want to see. Should we do a poll? Because this is an interesting. I'm going to do a poll, okay? How do I do this? No. Engage with your audience. An evangelical. I don't want. It's not giving me. Start a poll. Why is it just giving me yes and no? Shouldn't there be an option? I can give you 4. Am I crazy here? Okay, so I'm not going to do the poll. I'm just going to read from you guys. It's just a theoretical, just to illustrate something. Start a poll, and then it says, okay, create a question. It only allows me to do 2 options. I can't do it. I think I got it 1. That's as many options I could do. We got 100% for Roman Catholic. Um, we got some evangelical votes, evangelis. RC is still winning by 92%. The last option is Walmart. Would you like to live next to Anglicanism, Muslim, RC, evangelical, or Walmart? The thing is to put you to pick all bad options, but then see. And there's many things in life like that. Just sometimes just no good option, right? What would you do? And then it's going to illustrate something. What are we at right now? 5% Muslim, interesting. 10% Anglican. 80% RC and 5% evangelis. Now, what's interesting about this too is a separation between also the errors of the ideology or theology versus the ethos that it creates too, like the ability to tolerate in terms of living and stuff like that. Now, obviously, those are connected in some way too. But I've thought about this politically in terms of political groups, that it's like there's groups that I totally disagree with. But yet I find that they're actually more tolerable, actually, people to be around than a liberal for some reason. Why is... Could be, because liberals always run their mouths, and but somebody on the other extreme too could run their mouth too. I have to kind of entertain these. I'm like, why do I find, again, if I disagree even politically with the group, I'd actually find them much more tolerable people to be around than... That's an interesting... the analogy carries over to the religion too. Is like, as much problems as I have with Anglican, Islam, Roman Catholics, and evangelicals, some people are just actually in person much more tolerable to be around. And we're going to think about that. I like the Anglican one on there too because it's really waspy. That is Chad Buckenston Worthington III. Daddy, when are we going to the yacht, Daddy? Muslim? Why come one equal one? We have 25 votes. We can do one more. Add one more, and then I'll tell you what I think. As if you care, but... One more. Come on. Got 46 viewers. We just need one more vote. There we go. All right. End poll. The winner is Roman Catholics. 73%. 11% Anglican. 11% tied between Anglicans and evangelical non-denoms. Muslims were the L. Well, I have to say that you accurately represented and described my own psychological state. And I think in descending in the exact order, I would actually prefer, as big problems I have with Roman Catholics, I find that I work at a Roman Catholic college. I'd much rather live with a Roman Catholic than an Anglican, an evangelical, or a Muslim. And I'll give you the different reasons for that. I think it has something to do with a shared history and also an ethos. The ethos of a Roman Catholic and a shared history with us, I think that makes a difference with the Orthodox. I do appreciate Roman Catholics' intellectual and scholastic rigor and their schools. Those are things that make it, much easier to kind of live next to a Roman Catholic. We can commiserate together against the Protestants. And interesting enough, you'd think, riddle me this, at the same time, I could commiserate with Protestants against Roman Catholics and certain correct objections that they have of the papacy, but yet I have a harder time with that. And I think that might be because we don't have a shared history with Protestants. Would that be you might. Anglicans hard because they're totally woke, Skittles, liberal. And so you might, maybe that's why the tie, you might actually prefer to, I would probably say that. I would probably prefer to live next to an evangelical non-denominational because they tend to, in terms of morality and politics, be a lot more conservative. So I would find them, but they're just unbearable in the sense of that they're, out of all the different Protestant groups, I would probably say, generally speaking, that they're the most unlearned historically, theologically, in terms of numbers, than any other Christian group. And that makes it, but they're really emotional, right? They're really convinced of like they're right and without any argument. That makes it really difficult. So that's a hard one. It's like morally and politically, yeah, we're probably closer to evangelicals. But that combination evangelical makes it really frustrating and two, they have this, they feel like they got to proselytize. I don't think you'd find that with Anglicans, right? You don't have the level of kind of like proselytization. So that's a hard one. And maybe that's why it's tied. That's a really, I don't know. I certainly wouldn't want to live next to Islam. They are not based. Um, People always think this. Uh, it's less of a religion and it's a weaponized political thing, and all kinds of skittles and weird stuff comes in through is like that's what you guys don't realize, um, and because they're a weapon and just the kind of culture, there's no way that like I think there's never the case where it seems that they can actually live next to Christian. Maybe I don't know, like in early days in Palestine and stuff like that. Uh, but I think that it's just naturally they push you out. Um, so the other ones are as many problems they have. Like obviously there's a shared kind of history, even with Protestantism as compared to Islam, in terms of Christianity, that those can kind of coexist. And I'm like, Islam is not, you're gonna get, in the name of being based and conservative, and like you're gonna get pushed out, and I think that's true. So I would agree with you guys. I think Roman Catholics would be the easiest for me to live with, and I don't know, maybe evangelicals next. Yeah, Muslim. That's a great point. They're really actually like. I remember in Fullerton, when I lived in California, where like a Muslim, the one of the first Muslim. It was like a mayor or something like that. The first thing that person did was put a Skittles flag up on the city hall. Like, it's like, I think David Erhan has covered this too. That people think, these Andrew Tate types think that like, yo, so base. It's a reaction to. It's like, you ain't gonna get, because Islam isn't about theology. It isn't about morality and ethos. It's been subverted. It's a geopolitical weapon. So, and you're on the other side of that. You ain't gonna like. That's the worst part about is like it's not unified. Anything. It doesn't need to be morally, theologically. It's simply it's a weaponized religion. Like, so it doesn't need to be. It could be anything they want. Yeah, that's good too. We have a love of the Theotokos with Roman Catholics as well. So, do you see what the analogy is then? If I can do that in terms of religions, and I've been harsh on, in terms of apologetics on each and every one of those that I just mentioned. That does not mean that I believe that they're either theological or moral equivalents. I would say that's a great kind of insight into politically. That, what's the greatest, or what would be the hardest to actually kind of live with in terms of ethos, ideologies, and stuff like that. In my mind, it would be the liberals and the left. Like, it just deal with those things first, and then it's easier to deal with. All right, just my personal opinion. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, but I think that's a good analogy. Other questions? We've been going for a while. 3 hours. If you have a super chat, throw it in, and I'll take that up. Yeah. Do you think I'm biased because I had a Roman Catholic education too? I have to identify some of my biases too. They could make it where I'm not seen objectively. Um, I had a bad experience with evangelical non-denominational Christianity. Maybe I'm tainted. Maybe I'm not seen objectively. Um, what I did is to run to the other extreme to study at what I thought was obviously really is kind of in some sense the opposite, was Roman Catholicism, and I went to one of the most Roman Catholic colleges in the world, Thomas Aquinas College, and I studied that. Now I worked out at the same time that I was exposed to Orthodoxy, and so it wasn't just one sided. I was able to like, oh, okay, there's a third way. There's a different, you know, position on all, take on all these things too. Now it took me a while to kind of work through that, both spiritually, morally, life experience and stuff. But I remember at Thomas Aquinas College realizing, I'm like, yeah, if I was to convert, it would, if I ever left Protestant, it would be to Orthodox. I just wasn't ready. Um, but there's clearly, my educational background formation was in Roman Catholic studies. Obviously the great books and stuff from the Roman Catholic perspective, and studying all these issues. And there was a lot of things that I appreciated about. Maybe that makes me jaded on that I can't answer this question completely objectively. Maybe not. Maybe it gives me insights. I don't know. I'm just identifying. All right. More questions before we. There are some goods at like not all of Anglican. See, the problem is that Anglicanism, like, is not united. It's completely fractured. You get a very very small group of traditional that's like, well, they've got to find some conservative bishop in Africa to come under or something like that. They certainly have a more liturgical kind of mindset, which is like I appreciate. Right before I converted to Orthodoxy, I was kind of finding my way. Um, I was so identified as being a Lutheran, but I didn't like what Lutheranism had become liturgically, and so I was like, well, I could be an Anglo Lutheran and go to Anglican liturgies and have a high kind of liturgy while keeping the theology that I wanted. And I had to actually find one of those kind of high church conservative Anglican communities to actually go to services to. And I'm like, what is this even? And I remember thinking about that. I'm like, this is so stupid. Like, it has no power. Like, it's not united. It's not conciliar with anything. It's just very Protestant in that sense. It doesn't do anything. Um, but I think deep down in my heart, because of my bad experience with evangelicalism, I knew at a young age, I'm like, something's off about like this kind of anti-hierarchical, just emotional strip down, which means secular, right? Stripping down, um, really bothered me in high school, and so obviously my heart was seeking liturgy. Okay, hurry up. Last questions and super chats, and then we'll depart for today because I gotta get grading. It was a good stream. Thank you all for your support. Thank you for those that joined prayers. All right, I think that's it. Nobody else. Let me just check and make sure I didn't miss a super chat. We thank Dave the Philippian, Daedalus, Handmaid Leia, Feeling the Wolf, Hush Tones, and Jehovah Thickness for their support and contributions, super chats and tips today. May God bless you, keep you, and give you strength. Until next time, God bless everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.